Bienvenidos a nuestro séptimo episodio de nuestro podcast Guáchame Testimonios of Resiliencia. My name is Rosario Dominguez.
Yo soy Nancy Dominguez Fret, and in today's episode we have invited Mario Vega. He will share his journey of earning his bachelor's degree after 12 years due to many life circumstances. Mario is a living testimony of how non-traditional college students navigate difficult and important life events, but still achieve their academic dreams. Mario, we are so happy to have you here with us today. Thank you for accepting our invite.
Thanks.
Here's a little bit about Mario Vega before we start the conversation.
Okay, so Mario was born in San Luis Potosí, Mexico, and at 2 years old, he moved with his family to the south side of Chicago. Mario recently graduated with honors from UIC with a bachelor's degree in political science and a minor in psychology. He has worked as a community faith-based nonprofit. He has worked as a legislative aide for a state senator and is currently the director of mentoring for a community faith-based nonprofit org in West Humboldt Park. Mario's work in the community has been featured in a documentary produced by the Audience Network called Beacons of Hope, for those who have maybe watched it, alongside other faith-based leaders in Chicago. Mario is also a 13-year veteran of the Air National Guard, where he serves as an aerospace mechanic and is also a recipient of the Air Force Commendation Medal for an act of courage. Mario and his wife Lorena live in the south side of Chicago, and they have a beautiful 2-year-old daughter. In their free time, they enjoy going on walks together and exploring the city.
Okay. So thank you so much once again for being here with us. We wanted to get started with asking you if you can share a little bit about where and when your college career or journey started.
Yeah, for sure. So I actually started at 19 years old. So when I was 16 years old, I was actually living in Chicago, and then my parents ended up moving to Florida. And once we got over there, I finished my senior year, senior year, and then right away I managed to get into college. Over there, when I was in school here in Chicago, I was an IB, so I had when I graduated high school, I was taking a bunch of AP courses and different things. So I graduated with a 4+ GPA, and I had a pretty high ACT score. And so when I was 18 years old, just because of all that and my academics, I ended up getting letters from Harvard and Yale and Stanford and the White Hat School of Diplomacy. And when I was young, I remember telling my mom, hey, this is cool. Stanford said, hey, you just submit the application. We'll waive the fee. We'll waive the essay. And I remember telling my mom, look, I got these letters. This is dope. And my mom, who's a very supportive and incredible person, for some reason at that time, said she's like, mijo, but you've never been out of the house. You haven't even been away from us for longer than a weekend. And basically, she kind of made me doubt myself. I remember talking to my school counselor at the high school, and the high school that I went to in Florida was not I would say the most accepting high school. I got detention for speaking Spanish in school.
Wow.
And then I got detention so many times just because I was speaking Spanish. And when I actually got there, I went from taking AP courses as a sophomore, and then when I went to the high school and I said I was Spanish, my Spanish was my first language, they put me in remedial classes. Mm-hmm. And so they put me I was literally taking physics, and then next thing I know they put me in remedial math. And so the school was basically, when I talked to my counselor, the same one that put me in all those classes, in the remedial classes, I'm hey, I got these letters. She's she's let's be real, you're not gonna make it there. Wow. If you go there. It's but here's a beautiful community college you can go to. And so long story short is that in high school, basically with my parents, when my mom freaking out about me leaving the house, and the counselor basically kind of putting down the notion of me going to an Ivy League school or something, I just kind of went all right, bet. And I just went to FIU, Florida International University. Okay. And that's kind of where I started off my college at 19 years old. Same thing, political science, everything. I went in there with a Florida Bright Future Scholarship because of my GPA. And my college was basically more or less free. I worked in the summer to pay it off, but the first few semesters was at FIU in Florida.
So from the beginning, they were already doubting, even though you were an IB student, an honor student, they were doubting that you couldn't, that you could go to an Ivy League school.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other funny thing. In that school, in high school where I was when I got to Florida, like literally the only Mexicans there was me and my brother. Like that's it.
So it was
Yeah.
a very
They're like,
racist environment.
Yeah, it was just like, yeah, like, you know, like we have diversity here. Like, yes, me and my brother are the diversity.
Diversity.
Yeah, we are the diversity. Like, how do you feel about the diversity in school? Like, me and my brother are it.
So there was like you didn't report the counselor atmosphere. Like there was like nothing probably would have happened if you would have reported.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things too where you're young, you're like in a whole. I mean, I grew up in the south side of Chicago, and then all of a sudden like I find myself in a space where like now you know I'm actually the minority. In Chicago, I never felt like the minority.
Right.
Go to that area and I'm like, oh, now I understand I am the minority. And people will go up to me and you're like, you're from the south you're from the south side of Chicago. You're Mexican. Like, so you must be ghetto. I'm like, it's like I'm not ghetto. Like, you ever been shot at? Like, well, yeah, but like that's not the point. Like, it's like, yeah.
So, was there a specific reason why you moved from Chicago to Florida? Like, what took your family there, and how did your family's life change when you moved to Florida?
Yeah, so it's actually, so this is actually moments that kind of preceded the recession. So one thing that happened, I don't know if you guys know about like predatory like lending and different things to that and subprime mortgages, but long story short is that the banks at that point were basically giving out loans to people that wouldn't normally qualify for like loans, right? And it was very incisive. It was very like, oh, this is almost too good to be true, and it was. And so I remember like my mom would come home, and they used to be like, you know, here in 26th Street or in Little Village, they would have like these newsstands, and they, you know, where you could just pick up newspapers and they were free. And like in there was just like things about like move to Florida, you know, get this loan, you know, you know, literally like build the home of your dreams. And so like me and my parents, you know, worked at a factories and work hard, but on the side we had like our little restaurant business, right? We would do catering, we would work on the weekends together as a family. And so we started making money, and so my mom's like, well, like, you know, we came to the United States for a better life, you know, like in Chicago you guys have experienced, you know, trauma and violence and things like that. And so for her and my dad, this was just like, you know, this is the opportunity for us to move to a place where it's safer, where it's like, you know, nicer, you know, aesthetically. And so so like my mom and my dad, you know, fell victim to that predatory lending where they moved to Florida and they took on a mortgage that at first was like good, but then, you know, eventually, I mean, they were paying like close to like $3,000 to $5,000 a month. And we had a restaurant. We actually had a restaurant over there. Once we got over there, we opened up a restaurant. Everything was going good, but then everybody started like, you know, foreclosing on their houses. And the neighborhood that I was in, which is all Latinos, they all like started disappearing. And everybody, it's funny because like literally like everybody that was there was like from New York, from all these different areas.
They had moved there.
Yeah, that moved there because of the same reason as my parents. And then like they wouldn't last a year.
Like so, they were able to get a huge house, like
a huge house, I mean the house that I literally like grew up in like a room that used to be a closet, and I shared my space with the furnace, right? And so like that was literally, it's like my bed, and then the furnace, and then when I moved to Florida, the house that we had, you know, we had like a 20-foot pool in the back. We had a river. We had intercoms to talk to each other.
Wow.
And so it's, you know, unfortunately my parents did fall victims to that, you know, to the predatory loaning practices. And like, you know, once I was like a freshman in college, like the unfortunate part too is that, you know, it's like as a young Latino, my parents, you know, both have college degrees in Mexico, right? But the experience that, you know, when they came here to the United States, they basically, you know, lived through the, you know, the experience of like Latinos that moved to the United States for the first time. And so when I went to college, like I didn't even know like terms, quarters, like I didn't know anything. And like, you know, once I got over there, it was just basically like, you know, people were just like giving me alcohol left and right, and like like my GPA and everything just kind of dropped. And so like my parents at that point too, because of the predatory lending and everything, at that point they started like, we can't keep up with this. And actually one of the things that also happened was that the Latino population over there was like also targeted for pyramid schemes. That's kind of when it blew up. And so my mom was like, I remember telling her, she's like, I had like 10 grand saved up, and she's like, well, like, this is our last chance. So it was just like, I'm like, seems like a pyramid scheme. It's like, it's not. I'm like, the way you're describing it, it's literally, it's the pyramid scheme. But like, you know, like, so when your parents are really like, you know, like, you know, you see that sense of desperation and you want to do something about it, you hope for the best. And I, young, naive, gave them the money, and then like that was basically
went away.
it. Yeah.
So then, you guys. I'm assuming you guys lost the house and the restaurant.
Yeah, yeah.
And then did you move back? You ended up moving back here, or did you move somewhere else? And like, how did that affect your schooling, right? Because you were like settled in. There was stuff going on in the background. You were going to school in Florida. Can you walk us a little bit through that?
Yeah. So this this is something that I remember about that kind of hurt me, right? So like, my mom always wanted a garden in Chicago, and we couldn't do that because of the space. Mm-hmm. We got to Florida, my mom finally built a garden, and she was finally like getting to the point where it's just like, this is it. She's got like her nopales, she's got like her chiles, she's got everything. And then all of a sudden, the news came that we just couldn't do it anymore. Yeah. And they foreclosed on it. They foreclosed on the home. And we were literally like chased out by the next person that was coming in.
Wow.
It's like this angry guy just came in, and one morning he's like, you guys got to get out. This is my house, and blah, blah, blah. And so, like, my parents had to foreclose on the house and lost the business, lost everything. And basically, my parents came into the United States after 2 years of working hard. They bought their first house, worked hard, got the restaurant, got the business, moved to Florida, and it seemed like it was going well, opened up a restaurant. And then all of a sudden, within like a year and a half or 2 years, everything just went crashing down. And so for me, like I said, like I did good in high school, high GPA, high ACT scores. But once I got to college, I had like no direction. I wasn't really sure what I was doing. Like I was literally like, even like setting up your schedule. Like I had a class like at 8 a.m, and then I had one at 8 p.m. because I didn't know how to balance that. Yeah. And so I literally like, when my parents left, they're like, we're leaving, and we have to go back to Illinois because Illinois was where the only family that we had in the United States. So I was just like, I'll finish out my semester. When I finish my semester, I'm like, with my parents leaving, and I couldn't. It's in Miami. Like I couldn't afford living in Cayote or Hialeah, and so it's just like, my scholarship was actually based out of Florida, so I had to be a Florida resident. It's just like either I become homeless and go to college and stay there, or B, I go back with my family. So at one point it was just like, unfortunately, because my GPA dropped so low and everything went bad, like it wasn't physically or but financially sustainable for me to stay there. So I literally like dropped everything and had to move back to Illinois.
So talking about what happened to your parents, we researched and we saw that between 2007 and 2015, nearly 1 in 5 housing foreclosures in the U.S. occurred in predominantly Hispanic communities. So why do you think that Latino families maybe were an easy target for these predatory actions?
I kind of just speak from my parents' point of view, and like I said, like a big part of it was the fact that that they were hopeful for it. And they obviously came to this country to want to do better, right? And I think that a lot of like big institutions and banks saw that, right? And the other unfortunate part is that when you think about financial literacy and different things like that, like especially like in brown and black communities, in more like financially like wealthy communities, parents are able to kind of pass that knowledge about financial literacy, generational wealth. In a lot of brown and black communities, you really don't have like that knowledge of like, hey, like here's a bank, right? In like, for example, like in Chicago, like in brown and black communities, it's actually where you have the most amount of like currency exchange stations, right? Yeah. You have less banks. And so like the idea that you make a paycheck and then you have to basically pay someone to get the money from your paycheck. And so so like I think a lot of banks basically use that as like, hey, this is an easy target for us to kind of be able to get into these subprime mortgages, unfortunately. But
that's so unfortunate that like they kind of sold the American dream, like taking advantage of people. Like I'm assuming it happened to a lot of people, and also a lot of like individuals your age probably went through similar stuff that they had to like stop their lives and go back to to other states. But how did that affect you, like your college journey, right? Like you moved back to Illinois. Did you continue going to school, or did that like put a pause on your studies?
So, when I came back, like I said, my GPA was just like trash, like 1.2 GPA, right?
Wow.
It was like, I didn't even know it could go that low, right? any lower, and it's just like, you're basically hitting negative, right? But so, when I came back, it's just like, I basically went to college, and at the end of like 2 semesters, I had nothing to show for it, or like a semester and a half, I had nothing to show for it except for debt, and I couldn't qualify for any other kind of like like, I guess I could have gotten like grants and loans, but but when it came to like from my academic and merits, it just wasn't there.
Yeah.
And so I remember when I came back, and I was just like, all right, like the more immediate need was just like, we need a place to live, we need something like that, right? And so like my mom and dad right away went to work in factories, and I started applying for jobs. And then when I started applying for jobs, I realized like the only thing that I qualified for was the same thing, working in factories. And I was just like, man, I literally, I was gifted from first to eighth grade, and then in high school I was in honors, and at the end of all that, the only thing that I have to show for is basically just like, student debt, and the only thing I qualify for is for like blue collar work. Which nothing against blue collar work, but I was just like, I didn't study or work all that. It's basically kind of just like end up making, minimum wage. And so, yeah, like I was just like, I feel like I was in a rut, because like I'm like, I want to go to school, but I can't afford it. My GPA is horrible. My parents are struggling financially, and I think one day, like I was taking my mom to work, and like I would drop her off at this factory, and then like one day she wasn't coming out. Like, why is she coming out? So like I went inside, and I remember like one of the last visions that I had of Florida was my mom working in her garden, and her being so happy, and in her mind it's like, we made it, ya estamos aquí. And then I go, and she's basically in a factory, and she's standing in front of this conveyor belt grabbing like nails, and little like 8 to 10 hours a day, standing up, putting them in a Ziploc bag. And it's just like no windows, everything's gray, there's like a little light bulb, it looks like horrible. And it's just like, man, like at that point I was just like, I gotta do something, right? Like I felt like I was a burden on my family. And I was actually, going to church at one time, and one of the pastores, he quoted things que Gabriel García Lorca, and he said, el ser humano no nace cuando sale del vientre de su mamá, pero cuando se hace valer por sí mismo una y otra vez. And so at that point, it's just like, well, I'm a burden. Like, I felt like a burden, right, to my parents. I'm like, I'm just literally there mooching off of them. I can't do anything. So I'm like, I'm going to pack up my bags, and I moved to Chicago. Like, back to Chicago. I have no idea why, but I'm like, this is what I'm doing, and I'm going to move to Chicago, and I'll make it on my own.
And they said that when they were working in those factories, they were in Florida. They stayed.
No. Once they went bankrupt and lost everything, my tia and my tios were living in the Quad Cities, which is about 3 hours away from here. Okay. So we ended up going to the Quad Cities
and living there. You decided to come by yourself.
Yeah, come back to Chicago. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it seemed like, and that started like your delay on the like 12-year journey of finally graduating, right? And it seemed like it started off a systematic issue, because you were an honor student, you had all the potential, but then this systematic event happened, and it kind of, you were now in survival mode. Like, you were thinking, okay, how do I want to go to college, but I need to work, and also like I feel like a burden to my parents. I need to go figure things out, right? So when you arrived to Chicago, like, what other things happened? Did you go back to school right away, or like what was that like your time?
So the first few months I was actually like living in my car. Like, it was cold. It was like, and that's the other thing. I probably should have thought about it better ahead of time, but I moved over when it was winter.
Oh, okay.
And it's like I had una cobija de San Marcos that I still have to this day. Super dope. Product placement. But like, no, seriously, like I had a cobija de San Marcos, and I'd wrap around like a burrito, and I just sleep in my car.
Oh man.
And that's how I sustain myself. And I started working at Subway, and I people were like, why are you, I started losing weight, like a lot of weight. And people were like, why are you, how are you losing so much weight? And it's like, I'm on the Subway diet. Like I'm the Subway diet is not the sandwich. It's like I'm literally living off of their wage, right? And so it's like they're giving me like what I'm making is not enough. And so like at one point I'm like, I have to get back to school. I have to do something, right? Like I can't, I'm literally living in the streets. And then that's when I'm like, I joined the military. The military was like a viable option. Before I would never have thought like, this is something I want to do.
Right.
But my brother, same thing. He basically decided to join the Air Force. And so I'm like, well, if he did it, like I'm gonna do it, because I need to figure something out. So like at 19 years old, like I enlisted. And before enlisting, you have to take like a test. So same thing. Like I was super broke. Like I had no money, so I would literally just go to the library and just like study until I took the practice test and scored 100 on it.
Wow.
Over and over and over again, and then finally took the test, and that's how I got the qualifications, and I joined the Air Force like at 19.
Wow. Out of need for money, but also thinking of like I want to get college done, right?
Yeah, yeah, the benefits, and then like their bonus is like it's like was it like, and it's funny because like back in the day I was against the war of Iraq and all this other stuff, and then like when I joined the military, like a lot of friends were like, well, where was that Mario at? And it's just like, dude, like they give me 15 grand, like they give me like $30,000, and it's just like, it's like you sold your soul for 30. Like I've done dumber for less money, but it's a young person that's like literally living in the streets, and it's just like you see that as an option, and it's just like, you just kind of go for it, I guess.
And it's interesting how, like you said, it's systematic. Like if you think about it, like I work with a lot of Latino students because I teach Spanish, but like a lot of them have so much potential, but like educators, administrators, and just the society, we don't understand how much package they're carrying sometimes when they come to our classes. Like you were really brilliant, but then this counselor tells you like you're not gonna make it, and then not having that like knowledge of what the college process is here can also, like you said, push like what is a GPA, what what is FAFSA, like what is all that. And like how like a lot that closed a lot of doors, right? Because if you would have had like maybe a counselor that was supportive, go to Stanford, maybe you would have gotten a full ride. Like we will never know, right? Yeah. But like and then you go like this is my option. Can you tell us a little bit about your time there in the Air Force and like did you also join because I know that they can pay for your college? Like that was that kind of like still a dream in your head? Like maybe I can go to college if I. Pay for it if I do this. Yeah, I mean that was a dream. Like the idea is just like, not of just having a job, but having like a career and a vocation. Yeah. And so that was like literally like the big motivator, right? And it's kind of funny because I remember like once I was in boot camp, and we were getting close to the end, and there's like something called immunity hour, where like you literally like close to the end right before graduating. Like you get to sit down, everybody has a group with your drill instructor, and he's like, the whole entire time he's basically like your worst enemy, and then in that hour it's almost turns into Barney, right? It's like we're all here, we're all friends, we're all like I've been to where you guys are at, and we're all talking about like there, right? And it's kind of interesting because like we're in a room with like for about 40 guys, a lot of them like from like the marginalized parts of America, a lot of brown, black, and especially like poor white. And everybody's there, and it's interesting because we start going around the circles like, why are you there? Literally like almost everybody's just like I need the benefits, like either healthcare or like I need education, right. Or I need like a place to live. And this was literally like 3 square meals. This one guy would always say like 3 square meals a day, place to live, and a purpose. I'm like, all right.
It's like if they target these like low income neighborhoods. I remember at Bogan, like this guy from the Marines kept calling me, and I'm like, dude, I am not gonna join the Marines. I'm going to college. He's like, well, how are you gonna pay for it? Loans. And he's like, do you really want to be in debt? Like he was just like, if you join us, you can pay all for it. And I'm like, I am not joining the Marines. Don't call me again.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's kind of one of the things, right? Like, and especially because I work down in the community, right, in the South Side, and a lot of these high schools, like what you don't see like college, counselors coming to the schools to recruit. What you see is a lot of like our military people coming in to recruit. You have more recruiters, and so like with a lot of the kids that I work in the community, like they're really smart, high GPA. It's like, hey, what are you doing after college? Like, I'm joining the military. He's like, but you get college for free, like that, right? Because you're graduating with in Chicago, if you're a college high school student, you graduate with a 3.0 and higher, and you take the placement test. And you pass, first years of school are free. And it's just like, but a lot of people are like, yeah, but my cousin's in it, my tio's in it. It's just like, I'm like, you know what? Like literally, if your cousin, your tios, and all of them were in college, and that's what you saw, it would be like an easy transition. But because everybody that you have is in the military, and so it's the same thing with me. Like I wouldn't have done it if my brother wasn't in it, and then my sister joined, like after I did.
Wow. So the whole
all of us,
all of you guys joined. So then did you continue, like are you allowed to continue college while you're in the military, or like did you join the
how long were you there? And like
so like I mean my training lasted about 9 months. Mine's one of the longer trainings, just because like it's like a lot more technical. But once I came back, it was just like you just have to come back and show up once a month. And so like at that point it's just like, all right, bet, like now I can go to school, right? And that's what I did. I started going to school, but then at the same time, like unfortunately, like I said, I had no family in Chicago, right? I'm like, okay, like sweet, like my school is free, but like I still need a place to live. Right. I still need to pay my bills. Like I couldn't even afford cricket. I mean, that's how bad it was, right? And it's like, like no hating on cricket, but it's
I use cricket. It's really affordable. Everything unlimited is affordable. Get it? Just kidding.
$3.99. I'm just kidding. But no, like I remember like my tia would come by and visit me, right? And my mom and dad were still working, so couldn't come visit me. But my tia would basically, I wouldn't say snitch on me, but she'd be like, she'd go back and be like, like I went to, they call me Beto because my middle name is Alberto. Like we went to Beto's house and he, like literally, like it's like my dinner was this. It was like literally a piece of toast, grab a can of tuna, pop it open, dump it in there, roll it up like a little taco, and that was my dinner.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and so like same things. Like I wanted to go to school, but then it was also like the needs of like wanting to like have a place to live that was decent.
Basic needs, right?
Yeah.
Like a good dinner, a warm place to sleep.
Yeah. I was actually talking to my wife about this yesterday, right? Actually, this morning, because we were talking about just how we've like changed. But like when we first started dating, I remember like she came by and I was like I told her, yeah, we're gonna watch a movie, and like literally it was like my laptop on top of a foldable chair and a futon, but without a mattress. It was just like literally just the metal, and and so we had to move the chair like
in that moment right, I knew she was a keeper.
Yeah, like at that point it's like and it's funny because after I joined the military and everything, my mom goes like, it's just like kind of like at that point she didn't know my wife at that point, but she goes like just be careful that I said that that she's not in it for the money and this is like that. Like mom, like literally if you saw where we were at. You would realize that's not at all, but like it's just like at one point you just want to do better for yourself, especially because at that point a lot of my friends that went to college had already started graduating, and you saw them and they were like doing great things, and you see yourself, and I'm just like, man, I'm still like living literally 3 blocks down from where I grew up in public housing. Like I have like literally like even the carpet that was there is not mine. It was literally someone left it there, right? And I didn't even have like a mattress. And so I ended up like getting a job, and it was actually for another like nonprofit agency in the south side of Chicago, and it was like public housing, right? And so the original job that I had was just answering phones. And so my mom always told me, actually everyone always told me, not just my mom, but like basically whatever you do it to the best of your abilities, because every single day you're basically working up to your next promotion. In that job, I basically kept getting promoted to the point that I actually became, within 4 years, I became the facilities director. And it was like one of the biggest like public like housings in the entire city. It's like 1,000 apartments, 100 buildings, and I was in charge of all of that. And it's one of those things where it's just like, it's just like, do I want to keep going to school, or do I want to keep making money? And it's just like, I feel like when you have like the support of like knowing that your family's there to back you up, and you have like different like things like alternatives, it's more easier to be like, nah, like I'm good. I'm gonna
finish college.
Yeah, but I didn't have that, because it's just like if I don't work, like what am I gonna do? And so fortunately, like I did, I was going part-time, but I was also working like about 60 hours a week. So it came to the point where it's just like, man, like, and at this point I'm like, if I'm going to school, I want to like, I always say like I always like do bargain shop. So it's like, if school is free and they're paying for everything, I might as well go for 2, like, not just a bachelor's. I'm going to go for I was actually trying to go for 2 bachelors at first. Like I might as well add in another one, right? 2 for the price of 1. And so, but at that point it's just got really hard. I was trying to keep my GPA up and everything else. So it's just like going part-time, and it's just at one point it was just like too much. Yeah.
So after you were working in that public housing place, what happened next? Did you find a way to go to school full-time yet, or where did you go next?
Yeah, so like it was 2016, in the beginning of every single year, like I always do like 30 or 20 days of fasting and praying, right, where I just kind of pull away from the world, like seclude myself, spend time in prayer, and just kind of like thinking like, what's my next move, what's the next thing that I'm gonna do. So in those 21 days, like it's funny because like I just got married, bought my house, and just got promoted. But in that moment, I, like in my mind, I felt deep down inside that like, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. This is not what I wanted to do. This is not when I was 13 years old that, when I basically like, thought about where I was at and where I was living and everything else. Like, this is not the vision that I had myself for as an adult. And so I literally like, I think after coming back from my honeymoon, I lasted about 2 weeks. And then I'm like, all right, guys, like, this is it. Like, I'm out. Like, I'm dipping out. And be like, what? Like, yeah, like, this is it. Like I'm leaving. Like
from the military.
No, not from the military. From my regular.
Oh, from your regular job.
Yeah,
okay.
From a regular full-time job, and I literally just told my supervisor, I'm like, hey, like I just spent 21 days, and she knew about this, and like it's like that I spent about 21 days fasting, and so she's like, no, like I totally understand. Like, do you want a promotion? We'll give you a promotion. Like, no, I'm good. And so like at 2016, I just made the call, like a fate call that I don't know how, but I knew one way or another that I was going to like, make it through and do the things that I was supposed to do. And so in 2016, I just quit my job. Luckily my wife was still working, down, in the neighborhood. And so, I just dedicated myself to going to school full time. And at that same time is when, when I didn't have a job, I'm like, I'm going to dedicate myself and my time to like working in the community, serving as much as I could to whatever capacity I could. And so I started helping out with like the food pantry and started doing all these things like here, like at New Life where I work now, for the church side. And so once upon a time, like I started getting really involved with like the young people, right, in the community. And so I was actually supposed to be preaching on a Saturday, and that same week that I was supposed to be preaching, like on a Tuesday, like I still remember this, like on a Tuesday morning, I was like out in front. We just went, like I was helping out at the local food pantry here in the same church, and we just got done picking up a bunch of like food, and we were basically unloading it. And as I'm loading it, like right across the street, there's like a corner store, and this one guy was like exiting, and it was a young guy in the community, and somebody came up to him, false flagged him, he's representing gangs, and he ended up shooting him. Like he just emptied out the clip, shot him up, right in the corner.
Wow.
And so when that happened, I ran up to him. Like after the shooting subsided, one of my other friends was there. He basically followed the guy because there were kids across the street in a school, and they're all in the playground. And so one of the guys that I was with went to go check up and tell him to go inside. The other person followed the guy to make sure he was leaving. And I ran straight at the person. And so, when I saw that, like I kind of saw like a glimpse of like, for me, like my faith is basically everything, right? My faith is kind of like the sun, not only because I see it rise every single day, but through the sunlight, I'm able to see everything else. And so, like when I saw that, I saw people that basically ran, right? And I don't blame them for it, right? Self-preservation it's like it's
survival mode. Yeah,
it's good, right? I saw a mom picked up her daughter and run, and I don't blame them for that. But I think about like for me and the church, and what it means for me to live out my faith. The person who was out on the ground, he was bleeding, right? Like it didn't matter who he was, whether he deserved it or all that other stuff, right? That was somebody's kid who was bleeding out and on the streets. So I gave him first aid, and like in the basement of the church, we always had like I call them las abuelitas, like they're the ones that are like always volunteering, always helping out. And so when I went to go help them, like they made a circle around me and started praying, and they provided protection from anybody coming in retaliating or any. And so so like for me it was just like thinking and talking about God. It's just like, why did you show me this this thing, or make me be part of this, like literally the day before, a few days before I'm supposed to get in front, preach to a bunch of young guys in the community. And so like it felt like a big calling, that this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm like, this is it. Like boom, like I got it. Like this is literally why I left my job. This is why I'm going back to school, and like this is it. And then literally when that happened, I ended up deploying. Like literally, it's just like you're leaving at the end of the in October at the end of the year. I'm like I was gone, and I remember being like heading over to the desert. I was like praying to God, like what was that? Like I thought I was doing the thing and it was good, and now like what? Like now deployed, I'm here. Yeah. And so like even then, like in the desert, thinking about everything, and thinking about what's my purpose, what am I gonna do when I come back. I started reading this book. It was called Where the Cross Meets the Street. And it's by this author named Noel Castellanos, who's actually also from the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And
I think he talks about my mom in that book.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He said he mentions my mom, or Paco said that Noel Castellanos mentions my mom. That she used
Noel Castellanos.
Noel Castellanos, yeah. I think he mentions my mom.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's that book, but I know in one of his books, he mentions my mom.
Yeah. Well, really.
Well, like not her name, but it's her.
In reference. I might have to look it back up again. But so like I started reading his book and what he did in a little village, and that's what he was doing. And I remember thinking in my mind, I'm like, I want to do that. That's what I want to go back, and that's what I want to do, and that's what I feel the calling for. And then, like, out of nowhere, like, Pastor Matt, who's the executive director of New Life Centers, he hits me up while I'm deployed, and I thought he was joking, right? He goes like, "Hey, when are you coming back? We want to offer you a position." I'm like, "Yeah, right. Like, you guys have never had any money to offer any positions." But I'm like, I think he was joking. He's like, "No, for real." I was like, "What?" And so I interviewed while I was over there.
Wow.
And like, I got the job while I was literally like overseas. I remember like we had a call, and I'm like bunkered up, and like over Zoom, and like the call was starting. But long story short is that I remember reading through the book, and the part that got to me was this one part where it talks about like Jesus' vision of like Israel, and says like, "I want to see the streets filled with the laughter of children, and I want to see people grow to be old." Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's the vision that I have for the community I love. And so so when I got back from my deployment, coincidentally, like my first meeting at my job was actually in Noel Castellanos, and
nice.
And so it's just like, all right, like say less, like this is like I know where I'm supposed to be at, and so like after that point, that's where I'm like, now I have more of a reason to finish my degree, and the motivation now was that the interesting part was that as I went and continued the last 2 years of my degree while working, is that everything that I was learning was actually stuff that I was already applying and doing in the real world, in the community, right? The idea of social capital, the idea of like different levels of intercession for like how do you deal with certain topics of violence and marginalization in communities. Mm-hmm. And I was living that, and it's funny, like it was a political degree, but I was living through that through like the work in the church. Mm-hmm. And so like it kind of changed my idea of like, like when it comes to my degree, I'm studying political science. Do I really need to be in the political world for me to be able to do these things? And so... Yeah.
But you did, you were working in mentoring with centers, but you did take a pause with that and then started working for a politician, right?
Yes.
So what was that like? That experience?
So, so basically kind of like as I did the work in the community, like, you basically collaborate with a lot of different people. And through that, I was able to collaborate with a lot of politicians that are in the area that are really cool people doing stuff. And so that basically led to me like starting to work for one of the elected officials within the district, and that kind of came up from the same thing. I was in a documentary that documented the work that I was doing in the community, and that kind of led into that. And so it was actually happened in my last semester of school when I started doing that, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me it was kind of interesting because like I feel like it's one of those things where like I'm getting a degree working as a staff for a politician, yet I've never like done politics, and yet I don't have a political degree. But kind of like as I went to college and I did my classes, I also did the work in the community, so that like when I graduated, once I was getting to my last semester, even though like I still hadn't had my degree, I already had all these years of experience working in different parts of the actual field. And so so like once I actually switched over, I'm like, all right, like it's one of those things where I was just like, man, I love the work that I'm doing in the community. I love working with young people. I love doing these things. But I'm like, I've also spent so much time like working towards a degree in political science, and it's just like, this is like literally like someone offered me a position without me having to look for it, like an open door. I'm like, this is literally it, right? And so so basically it almost seemed like it'd be dumb if I'm getting a degree in political science and I don't make the transition.
You don't get that job,
but I went in and I jumped into it, right? And once I got into it, it was just like, I think one of the biggest like thoughts and different things that kind of came to my mind is the idea of like vocation versus career. It was just like, do you want something that pays the bills and you're able to come up in life in society, or do you want something that like you feel like you're called to do, and it's a calling more than an actual job? Yeah. And so like it's one of those things where like literally after like completing my degree, because I graduated as I was working in the political field, I just literally went like, nah, I'm good. Like I made that calling of like, but the interesting part is that even though I left that position, everything that I learned in college and everything that I was working for and everything that I was doing was literally tied into that type of work. And so one of the things that I kind of learned in life, and this is kind of like one of the things that is when we're talking about like the idea of like, you have a vision that like you want to go to college and you want to finish in 4 years and right away get a job, and by the time you're 26, married, house, kids, all this other stuff. I think from my experience and what I learned is that it's not exactly like a straight shot or a straight line, right? And everything that kind of comes in between is as valuable or more valuable than what you learn in an actual classroom, right?
Yeah.
And so like I think for myself that even though yes, I'm a recent college grad,
Congratulations.
Yeah,
yes,
thanks.
congrats. You just graduated.
I literally just
this
graduated.
year, right?
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah, finally.
After all those things happening.
It barely got into the mail. Barely got to the phone through the mail. So now it's official. Like you can't take it back. I have it now.
It's mine.
Yeah, it's almost like in boxing when you win the belt and it's just like it's my belt. Like you can't.
Because you worked so hard for it, right? Like you had to make all these processes.
Yeah.
And now you have a new job too, right? Congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're the director of mentoring for the church, not the church. I'm sorry, for the life centers. But so for how long have you been mentoring youth now? And then, what knowledge do you share with them now that you're working directly with them? And like, what have you learned from them? Right? Because they also come with a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
So like,
man,
you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, man. Like young guys, man. Like not young guys, like young kids, man. Like they're dope. Like it's one of those things where people tell you like, yeah, you're gonna learn from them as much as you learn from them, and it's like, yeah, okay, like I'm an adult, like I
know,
but then I got there and I started doing the work, and I'm just like, these kids are blowing my mind. Like these kids, like when you talk about resiliency and different things, like so like I work inside of the schools también through them, right? So like I through the organization I'm able to go into these schools and work with the kids that people consider high at risk, right? And so like I remember this like perfect example, like this one kid was basically like in trouble because he showed up to math class in his first period without a pencil, right? And I'm talking to him and it's just like the teacher basically, like this kid woke up like in the morning at 5 a.m., made breakfast for his siblings, got him dressed, made sure they had everything ready, got himself ready, did everything, got the lunch food or whatever ready, so when the mom gets back from work, she's able to cook, got the kids to the schools, got himself in there, made sure all the homework and everything was completed, and after doing all that, by 7, 8 a.m., he got in trouble because he forgot a pencil.
Wow.
And so, those are the things where, and so, like I remember this one kid, like he like we have a running program, right? And we were training to run like a half marathon, right? 13 miles. And he shows up and he goes like, he showed up on a Saturday, we ran like 8 miles, right? Or not even then, it was like 4 miles. And it's just like, he's like, all right, like next week don't come because we're all going to be running a half marathon. It's like, I can run. It's like, what's the most you ever ran? Like today was real. We ran 4 miles. This is 13 miles. And I'm like, you won't be able to do it. Like, you need to train more. It's like, no, I'm going to do it. Like, I'm going to do it. Like, I'm going to do it because he told me that I couldn't do it. And so I'm like, all right, show up. And he showed up. And not only did he like finish the half marathon, he beat me.
Wow.
And so like, and these are things, like where it's just like, you think like in my mind, I'm thinking that I'm going to come in and help these, people that need help.
Yeah.
What I'm doing is that I'm coming into a place where these young guys are already doing the work and doing things to better themselves. And I'm just kind of helping them along the way, right? And so, a lot of the stuff that I wish I would have known through college, these young guys want to do the same thing that I did at my age, where I wanted to say I just didn't know. So, like I create programs where like the kids like are able to talk to people in different fields that are Latino también.
Yeah.
That politicians like Rosario to help me out.
I spoke in one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like I'm able to teach them about like financial literacy, like like here's how you open up a bank account. I have people that work in the banking industry that are also Latino, that are also from the community, that come in and tell them like, hey, like I know like the question is like, can I have like a bank account if I just have an ITIN? Like, can I, what's a grant? What is the difference between a grant and a loan?
Yeah, I didn't know that either. Like, the Pell Grant, what is that? Okay, thank you for giving it to me.
Yeah, as long as you just give me money
it's
for
money,
college,
right?
Yeah.
But you just don't learn that, and that's really important. So I'm glad that you're engaging them in those conversations.
Yeah. So I'm able to do basically like teach young people here that want to do better for themselves, that are already doing better for themselves. I'm just equipping them with the tools for them to be able to do what they're already doing, on their own. But it's been super, super awesome, super dope. And there's kids that I've known, and I say kids, but like that I've known from 6th grade that are now in college.
Wow.
Last March there was this young girl that me and my wife, met when she was like 6th and 5th grade, and she was young, and like she got to her dorm as a freshman, and same thing, she was like struggling, making friends and this and that. So me and my wife went to go visit her, and it's just things like that, it feels like, yeah.
So just to conclude, what would be your message or advice to others that are listening right now, based on your whole journey, like earning professional experience, but finally being able to finish college, which all along it was still in the back of your mind, like, I need to get this done.
Yeah. It's, the idea that it's like, it's, if you have a plan, right, that it's going to happen in 4 years and everything's going to be like linear, if it kind of strays away and different things happen, that, don't take it necessarily that it's a bad thing, but also kind of take it with strides and know that, like, a lot of that, it's important for the experience of, like, where do you want to do and where you want to go. And even if you're not in school and you're not learning directly in a classroom, whatever you get from real life and from real experiences, all that stuff accumulates, and all of that can literally lead to wherever you want to go. And so it's like, not everything is lost. Yeah. Even if you take a few, detours around the course, it's all gravy. If at the end, you get to your destination, even if that means that you don't want to complete a college degree and you want to do something else, so be it. Mm-hmm. If it's everybody has different courses and different things and different callings. So.
Thank you so much. And I think that, like, because of your experiences, like, you're an awesome, you're mentoring in the way that you're really providing them with the tools that they're going to need to be successful, right? The tools that you wish you had. And I think that you have that special gift that exactly, how to get them there. Like, if it's faster or just, like, being there as a support system for them, which a lot of them, a lot of us don't have as first generation college students. We kind of are we kind of figure it out and create those paths for our family. Yeah. But thank you so much for sharing your testimony. It's so powerful. I'm sure that a lot of people are gonna love hearing it, and we wish you the best in your career, right? That it's like continuing, because it's not just starting. Like you said, you already had so much experience, and we're just really, really excited to see what the future has in store for you.
Yeah.
Y gracias a todos los demás que están viendo por YouTube o escuchando por Spotify. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook as Guachame Podcast. Y nos vemos en el próximo episodio.
Adiós. Gracias.